But, I did spend a good portion of my, let's say, high school time and early adults definitely trying to change and be more normal and fit in and, um, tick the boxes for the family. And I couldn't do it, didn't happen. And eventually, you know what, this is me. So it's up to you. You got to accept it or not. That's also your choice.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Epic Kate podcast. I am so excited to introduce Helen Hansen to you. What a fun person, and what a meaningful conversation. And if you know anything about me, you know that I love to hear about people's magical fairy experiences, and boy, does she have some neat ones. So I've listened to a lot, and this one is totally unique. It was neat as well that we connected over theater and how I was doing theater when I was in South Africa, where she happens to be from. She's just such a fascinating and wise person who is able to listen to the needs of animals. She's so unique and special in how she's managed to stay true to the magical child that she always was. And we didn't talk a lot about it, but we did talk some about the fact that she grew up in the thick of apartheid and how her and other children in that world were really hid from the reality of what was happening and how people were being treated. So this was a very fascinating conversation. I'm so glad you're here. Let's jump into it.
As we were saying just before you hit record, my journey actually started in theater. And I was working with children about 30 years ago, doing volunteer work, working with street children, but then also working with children on the other end of the scale. And it was so interesting to notice the similarities, not the differences, but the similarities. And at that time, I was putting together shows for children, combining these groups of children from very different walks of life and allowing their natural talents to blossom through. So we would never know pre production what was going to take place. It was always very exciting. And sometimes, the children would arrive, especially some of the street children, and they would be, well, we don't have a talent. And of course, that was often where the real gems and jewels lay. And it was now about in various ways. And at that time, I was very much playing with how do we extract naturally from an individual their jewels and gifts. And really coming from myself, a very raw background, not much life experience at that time. But that training for me, and I call it life training because it really was at that time, opened the doorway to the healing work that I do now. Because it was while working with these individuals and then with the groups as well. And you know what children are like, they are just so open, and you can engage with them in such an honest way. And that was the beauty of it for me from a very much a learning perspective, that from there I was able to develop these techniques and exercises, although at the time I wasn't calling it that. It was just all happening. But one thing I did do along my whole journey, up until today, I'm still doing it, is I take notes. I'm a note taker. So wherever I go, I've even got my notebook here with me now, just in case somewhere along the line something gets said and I need to take it down. So I've got boxes and boxes of files and files of notes. And every now and again, then I go through and I see, oh, wow, we're seeing a pattern here. I love to look for patterns and themes. So that's what came out of that experience. I was working in that way for a good couple of years before it got formalized. So we would do a lot of fun productions at a well-known outside theatre here in Cape Town, the V&A Waterfront Amphitheatre. And here you would see these children who came from the street performing to hundreds, if not thousands of people, and having them just in their complete mesmerizing experience. It was very meditative like, actually. And they were all coming with different gifts and different jewels. And from there, I was asked to do work with schools. Parents asked me, please, can you come into my home? I want you to work one-on-one with my child. So it started to branch out on its own. And again, more formalizing of, then I started creating curriculums. And I was very much, and still am, focusing on working through the school model. So I was working with teachers, I was working with parents, I was working with students, and of all ages. And along the way, without realizing it, although the theater was the vehicle, actually what was at the center of everything was mindfulness. And when I realized that, that's what I started sharing. I remember creating this advert and placing it in the newspaper, the Argus, and focusing on mindfulness, focusing on right brain learning and engagement and intuition. And I was advertising a new class that I was going to be running at the Baxter Theatre. Zero response. So I thought, okay, but it's interesting because we're getting such incredible response when we are doing this, in various environments. Let me reframe that. And so I spoke about the vehicle, and I spoke about more from a theatrical point of view, and developing, for example, confidence and having fun while being on stage, making it more like, didn't even mention mindfulness or anything like that. And again, that this is now in the 1990s. This is when this was all taking place. And suddenly I had this full class. We started, our first group was 30 kids of all ages, from all over Cape Town. And we'd meet once a week at the Baxter. And at the end of 6 months, we put on this production. Everything was run by the children. They not only played the parts, but they helped backstage. It was just an incredible experience. And the next class, it was even more. Eventually, we got to 100. That was like pushing it. The stage could barely handle. We were using the small stage at the Baxter. And from there, it just spread, and then moved to the Barnyard Theatres around South Africa. It was running in Cape Town, was running in Joburg. I've subsequently since sold the business because a few reasons. One was I was being asked to do a lot of one-on-one work, and working one-on-one with the students, especially in their home, starting to see that, it's not just the child we need to focus on. We need to focus on mom and dad as well. And when we go into the schools, it's not just the students. We need to talk to the teachers as well. We need everybody to be on the same page. And so this new curriculum started to develop, and new process work. And in the meantime, I'd studied developmental psychology, and along the way, other forms of psychology as well. Today, I work with holistic and archetypal as well. But I realized that I needed to take time to just do some one-on-one. So that is why I then handed that business model over to a lady in Cape Town, and she then ran it and is still running it successfully
Wow.
at the centers, at the schools. And it's got very much as its fundamental layer is narrative, the importance of narrative. How do we talk to ourselves? How do we talk to others? So I remember one of the things when training the teachers to actually run with this model, it was number one, you don't ever use the word no unless it's an extreme emergency.
Mm.
And that training was all about being mindful of, so we so quickly respond from a negative position. So, and I see this today in my sessions with one-on-one with clients, and I'll ask them a particular question. Okay, what's going on with this area of the body or that part of your life? And the answers will more often not be what's not happening and what's going wrong.
I want to interrupt you because this is all really good stuff, but I want to dig into your spiritual journey. Is that okay with you?
Absolutely.
All right. So I want to know about your your gift, your magic. When did you discover your ability to see how you could help people?
You know, if I think back to childhood, that was always something that was meaningful for me, although I didn't realize it at the time. I just loved it. I remember as a little girl, I would at home be like the silent fairy. I used to love doing these things for my brothers and sister and my mom and my dad with when they weren't there or when they weren't looking, go and do something that I knew that they needed.
Oh.
And then it became like this little game. And I would leave them, you know, maybe something tidy or neat, or I would make them. I love making something to bring a smile to somebody's face. And then I started receiving it back from them underneath my pillow. I would get this little note or a little flower. And that for me was really magical. And as well with animals, I actually thought I was going to be a vet. But in South Africa, your Afrikaans has to be like really good, which mine isn't, because the veterinary training is given in Afrikaans. But I've subsequently now been able to fulfill that part of my journey of working with animals through kinesiology, because I'm a kinesiologist. And that's where that part of my healing journey that I was talking about earlier, where the theater turned into healing and that evolved into the kinesiology. But it's definitely been something that's been with me. And it wasn't definitely wasn't taught. It's just an essence that's there where you can feel and you can sense when an animal is in need or there's something not right.
Mm.
I remember to a workshop about 2 years ago. I was running a Meridian workshop in Constantia, and I walked into this woman's home where we were presenting. I'd never been there before, and she's got this beautiful big dog in the corner. It was lying down. It was a hot day, and I went over to greet it. I always greet the animals. And immediately as I came, I could feel. And I leant down, was stroking the dog, and I said to the lady, there's something going on in his brain. Something is out of balance. Do you mind if I just do a little bit of work on him? So I did some balancing treatment, which is kinesiology based, TCM based. And he responded so beautifully. His whole body just relaxed, his nervous system relaxed, because the owner then confirmed for me. She said afterwards, this dog has a brain tumor. He's got a few months to live.
Mm.
But little treatments like that can just make life a little bit easier and a little bit more comfortable for the individual. And that is really what I like to focus on these days, is how can we help each other to experience life that is nourishing for both of us. And also bringing out our gifts and bringing out our talents and following our purpose, whatever description it is.
I have questions. Okay, so did animals leave you gifts?
That's a good question. As a child, I would definitely have said yes. I was the child who spoke to the animals and had a relationship and had a connection. And for me, it was extremely real. I remember being laughed at by friends and family. And I was like, but can't you hear this? Am I the only one? Subsequently, as I got older, I realized, okay, no, this is seemingly not just for me, but I'm the only one that's verbalizing it. And I learned to be quiet about that.
But you
And
didn't lose the belief about it. You just learned to not talk about it to others as much.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
great. That's so great that you didn't lose it and just like, oh, never mind. I'm too old for this foolishness. Whatever. It's good that you held on to it. I have other questions. Okay. So, kinesiology, is that like a psychic connection to animals?
So kinesi is the movement in the body. So in kinesiology, we look at the movement of muscles, but it's not just muscle movement. It's movement of everything. It's basically frequency movement. So through testing on the muscles, and we can do this in person, but we can also do it. We could do it right now, me online with you. We could do it in a remote session where the person's not with me. And I work with the frequency of their information. So they would send me a photograph, very recent photograph, and looking into the camera with the information. Incredible results. I've worked with not only animals, but people. So it's the study of movements in the body. We pick up imbalances in the structural part of the body, the chemistry set, in the emotions, in the spiritual body. So where we have imbalance, now we check and we see where is the body asking for balance to come through. So it never comes from me. I'm just a facilitator. And I get reminded of that all the time because sometimes somebody will come and they say, I've got a shoulder pain and I've been having this headache and this is happening and that. And I'm looking at all these clues and I'm going, that looks like a wood element issue. I wonder if it's gallbladder, although we've seen signs of liver showing up because the person's waking up between 1 and 3. Okay, so now I'm like focusing on wood there. And then we go into testing the body and getting information from the body because our bodies are, designed with an innate wisdom to self-heal. It's got the knowledge and it's got the information. We just need to know how to access it. Like we need to know how to tap into different apps on the phone. So now with kinesiology, the beauty of that is understanding all these different points along different meridians in the system. You can then pick up information. Then I go and I pick up from the individual that, oh, no, the root is actually maybe water, which makes sense because water element is mother to wood. So, you can start seeing the dots join even further. But it always reminds me that I think I know, but I don't. Trust the body. And it's to say that us humans don't know and to doubt our knowingness. But I think I'm talking about more the knowingness that is of an innate wisdom as opposed to logically constructing an answer. To trust that body's wisdom is a very different place to heal from.
Mm-hmm. So, have your nickname was the Silent Fairy as a kid? Did you ever see fairies or anything supernatural like in that realm?
So yes, I did. I saw people. I would often have, when I was little, I would have these guests over, and they would come and sit at the table, and I would feed them. and they were like really like flesh and blood to me. But again, I learned very quickly that this was not an easy experience for me to go through. I was, doing what was natural, but the people around me hadn't had that experience themselves, and it was sending them off center. So often
So
people then,
I'm confused. Uh, so you were feeding people that were fairies, and like what were people confused about?
so the people in my outer environment, in
Uh-huh.
my external environment, couldn't see what I could see.
Okay.
They were confused. Well, they just thought, she's a little child, and she'll get over
Like
this.
an imaginary friend situation?
Yeah, the thing is, I never got over it. I just stopped talking about it.
Okay.
Um,
So how was it
and
actually seeing them? Like what did they look like? How did they talk to you?
yeah, I would have full-on conversations, and that's when it really came out. When especially my family started like, "Who are you talking to?" And I'm like, "But can't you see them?"
Mm. What did they look like?
So the first friends that I had looked very real. They were from Germany, and they traveled all the way here to come and visit me. And they were they were cute. that's that's what I can remember. They had short, dark hair in like a bob color, and their clothes were like a beautiful, rich red and rich greens and rich purples and rich blue. And you know, after that experience, then I was in later years seeing more of, maybe one could say, different layers and levels. I didn't have that experience of seeing something so real. So it wasn't like magical like a fairy. It was a real person, but it just so happened that other people couldn't see this person.
Okay, now I understand a little more. Um, so how did you know that? So when you were like, why don't you see them? Did that make you look at them differently? Like, why can't they see you?
No, it made me look at myself differently.
Okay. And what did you
And
talk about?
gosh, that's a good question. I don't remember the conversation. I just remember the feeling and the sensation, and it was, I had known them. There was definitely a knowing, these weren't new people. It wasn't new friends. It was ones that I had known for a long time, which was also confusing, because I was saying to my family, "Well, don't you know them?"
Yeah. Do you
Um,
think that
I
they
don't
were like soul family?
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. And that's, I would say that type of experience was blocked for quite a while up until a couple of years ago. And then that started coming back naturally, where it was seeing of a similar nature, which was more real and not so real.
Mm. So they came from Germany to visit you. So they were actually you actually knew that they were on a journey for you. Is there any more details about that you can share?
I remember they arrived with their suitcases, and I remember saying to my mom, we're going to have to make up a room and make up beds for them. Um, and I think, if I remember correctly, that I was told to ask them to actually go and stay somewhere else, something along those lines, but I had to say goodbye to them. And I remember saying goodbye to them at the front door, and I was really, it was a difficult moment. And maybe, my parents thought this was a good way to just close that conversation
Mm.
and get me to bed.
How old were
Because
you, by the way, when this happened?
so that happened between the ages of 5 and 7. It happened
Okay.
regularly, 5, 7 years. And then when I went going into 8 and 9, then that stopped. Then
Oh.
it was more conversations like with animals. So I would hear the animals talking to me, but mind that time I would know, okay, we just don't talk about that.
So you just had to
Yeah,
be like, I have a feeling that the cat needs this. I won't tell you how I know, but let's try this.
exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
so where were the what do you think they were? Do you think they were fairies or gnomes or just people that just looked like people but were something of the fae gene? I don't know.
I've never thought about it, if one could say technically. I've just allowed it to be as a beautiful memory.
I understand that.
And
Were they
yeah,
disappointed when you had to say goodbye and you couldn't invite them into your house?
I don't remember. My emotions were just so strong at that moment. All I
Oh,
remember was, yeah, my emotional response. But they came back,
oh.
you know,
Have you
and
seen
they
them
came,
as an adult?
no, no. And yeah, I did wonder for about a whole year. And I remember sending them messages, just telepathically asking them to come back, but then that didn't happen.
Mm.
And yeah, then I suppose over time as a child, your attention is where the moment is. That's the beauty of
Mm.
childhood, is being so present. So I was very present then with the connection that I was making at the time, which was very strongly, as I said, with the animals. Plants came more late in adult years.
You can
Uh,
talk to plants?
well, you know, it's more with the plants, it's a sensation. So it's sensation information. So there's a certain vibration that comes through, and that vibration, I don't know, I cannot, again, it's not something that's been learned, it's you just know. I just know that, okay, this is the information from this plant, or this is the information from that plant. Um, that's been very interesting because it's very different, whereas like the animals, I would hear, literally hear. So I'm far more clairaudient. So I am occasionally clairvoyant, with the auras and what have you, and sometimes when working with clients. But I purposefully, when I'm working with somebody in a session, I will not go there unless somebody asks me to.
Yeah.
Sometimes it can almost become like entertainment for some people, and they, oh, tell me this and tell me that, and
It's like it has
um,
a purpose here.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, I purposefully don't go out into the world looking for that because it can become too much.
Mm.
Much.
That's where you go into energetic hygiene and protecting
Mhm.
yourself from not being a telephone that's just constantly receiving. But okay, this is a very silly question. It's not important at all. Do different animals have like different accents? If you're really like hearing them, do they have South African accents or the origin that they come from accents?
That's an interesting question. So I wouldn't say that there are different tones, but it's not because when one hears, and there's different types of the audience. So sometimes when I hear, it is like what we call the earthly realm, and it's very real. And that took me a while to differentiate, because sometimes I would think that, I remember once driving with somebody, I just wish this radio would go off. And eventually I said, would you mind just switching the radio off, please? It's just like it's getting too much. And he said to me, there is no radio on. And I'm like, okay. And I looked and he said, look, the radio's not on. And I realized, okay,
So
all right.
you were hearing the chatter going on in his brain?
No, it wasn't his at all. It was, so different messages come through at different times. It seems like for me that there's themes. Like for a year or a couple of months, there will be a theme of how things come through in a certain way. And for a time, it was through like this radio broadcast, but it wasn't chatter. It was very specific, and very clear, very audible. And it was about learning to tune into that station. So, okay, all right, there's information. Let me just relax into this. Don't get too excited. Don't get too anything. Just be present with it and let's see. And it's always been like that for me. It's information based. When I was learning about that, especially like teenage years, and I couldn't talk to anybody, and it was at that time it was more the clairvoyance. I was seeing a lot, and some of it could be really disturbing because I was seeing things, people. Then I started to realize this is stuff that I'm seeing that is going to be happening. And it was awful because some of the things I only realized too late, like seeing an accidents, and could I have done something? So that was a really difficult time, but a lot of that I had to unpack on my own, in my own way, and a lot of my journey has been like that, unpacking it in my own way and learning, okay, I don't know what that is, but it's okay not to know. Just relax and just allow. So, yeah, when I hear things, going back to your question, it's different types of hearing. So like with the radio station, which sounds more lifelike, earth lifelike, there is the other side, which, how would I describe it? It's vocal, but it's not lifelike. You can feel the difference. That's the best way. You can feel, okay, this is, although I'm hearing it, I know nobody else can hear it. But then sometimes I'm not sure about the others, like with the radio, it took me a while. Okay, all right. And, there's, I think, many different interpretations of that. Some might say, well, it's, your higher self talking to you, or your guides talking to you, or angels. There's so many different interpretations. That's why for my journey, have really benefited from going slowly, but unpacking it on my own and not relying on somebody else's interpretation. Just being, even though it'll take longer, and sometimes it's taken really long, but to be okay with that and to just allow the slow journey. It's, it's not a race.
So when you mentioned seeing things that were difficult, was that like ghosts or like kind of lower vibrational beings? Was it like a depression, or were you seeing like depression kind of hovering over people or things like that?
I would see things that I realized were going to be taking place. So I
Okay,
saw
so it was
something.
the future stuff, not necessarily creatures or whatever.
No, no. I've seen that a couple of times. I remember seeing some things and attachments on people, but again, I purposely don't like to go
Mm,
there. When somebody's really close to you, though, you do. And yeah, in one or two instances, then I've shared that when it's been relevant. Sometimes it actually isn't.
mm,
Uh, because everybody's on their own journey, and
right,
because I'm seeing something, it doesn't mean that the other person is ready to see that.
right. Oh,
So,
something you
mm,
said before we hit record, that elephants are a spirit animal for you. Do you have like a spirit
mm.
elephant that follows you around and supports you?
So that's interesting. When I was little, I'm going to go back a little bit and
Yeah.
then answer your question that way. Um, so I'm really, really little, like just learning to talk. And I was wanting to talk about myself, but toddlers, they don't talk about the I yet. So I referred to myself as Ellie. And to this day, in my family, I'm still called Ellie. And I'm sure there was some connection there. Subsequently, from when I was about 5, 6, we would, as a family, visit the nearby elephant park, which was Addo. I stayed in PE, and you've been to
Oh.
Addo, okay? So we would go there like so often. I wanted to move there. And that's really where I fell in love with elephants. And they have traveled with me. I mean, I've got little elephants there and another elephant there, and they're just everywhere. I've got an elephant scarf sitting in the cupboard here, and they've just connected with my soul. And there was a time that I stayed on the edge of the Tzitzikama forest, and I remember going to the edge of our small holding at that time, and we were living off grid. So it was like at nighttime, completely dark, except for the stars. And if the moon was out, then that would be your light. So I would take my camping chair and go and sit as close to the edge of the forest as possible. If I had my way, I would have gone in, but I was always told, no, you shouldn't walk around at night. I still do, walking around, in the forest, in the wild, when it's dark on my own. It's just, there's so much available to feel and sense and connect with. Anyway, so there are these elephants that are apparently in the Tsitsikamma forest. And there is Gareth Patterson is his name, an author here in South Africa who writes about the wild animals, the lions. He worked a lot with lions, and he happened to have a journey through the part of the forest, Gona, where I was staying for a while. And I was reading this book at the time, and it was just such a confirmation for me, because I could feel, and I just couldn't explain, but I could feel there are definitely elephants in this forest. And I'm reading this book, and he's saying, yes, there are 5 elephants that are roaming together, but he's not going to say where they are, because otherwise they'll be hunted. So then the one night sitting outside, I decided, well, let me just connect to them. So I did. And the next thing, about a kilometer away down, the valley went down a little bit. You hear this breaking of branches. Now, there's only one animal that can break the branches like that. Then I think, like, okay, maybe that was just like coincidence. A couple of nights later, I go do the same thing. Same thing. And every time I would go and sit there and connect, it was like an call and answer. And that was just so incredibly spiritually moving. So
Wow.
that the spiritual connection that I feel with the real life elephants.
That's cool. Oh, they are amazing. I've seen some in Kruger National Park, and it's amazing when you think it shouldn't be possible for these massive gray beings to be able to camouflage, but they do. You're like, I think there's maybe one behind those trees there. Is it? It is.
Yeah, yeah. It's the wild is an incredible curtain.
I
When
got
you
to
walk,
see the Zazu bird from Lion King. I didn't get to see any of the big cats, unfortunately. Got to see some rhinos.
I love the rhino.
Got to see baby warthogs, a little family of warthogs, not in Kruger, but another really neat spot. I can't remember the names of the places we went, but I wish that I had been in more of a space when I was there to, meditate, to think, to be and feel like we were often in places in South Africa where it felt like I was in prison. The gates, the bars and all the windows. I'm used to feeling a bit more free in life and not being locked into houses. I remember one time people left with the door locked and I was like, I gotta get out of here. I climbed through the window because I just felt so
Wow.
trapped.
Yeah, I can imagine that because I had a similar reaction when I went to Germany to do a workshop there, Birth into Being workshop, which is a beautiful method of breathing. But I remember they had these windows, huge, like floor to ceiling. And the room that I was staying in, I was on my own, but you could open like this whole window. But if it was closed because it was double glazing, it would be like really hot. And I woke up in the middle of the night and it was just too hot to be in the room without the window open. But the only way to open the window was to open the whole window. And there's no burglar bars. And I
But
couldn't
you're
sleep.
safe in Germany. It's fine.
My head told me that, but I realized my nervous system was programmed with something else.
Hmm.
Interesting. Because mentally I got it. And I was like, yeah, I know I'm safe. But my body couldn't go to sleep. So
Oh.
that interesting. And yet you come to South Africa and you have the opposite experience.
Yeah, I hated the bars everywhere and the motorized, and you have to have the clicker to open the key. And then the place where we lived before we moved to the vicarage, there were like six ginormous guard dogs that would just be set off anytime someone came in. And
Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
really did love a lot of it, but it was not an easy time. But I did love to be pregnant there. People were so nice. Like, there's two in there. No, you're joking. What a blessing.
You got
I
the
also,
accent there.
I love how South Africans say a funny thing for anything. If I told you it's my birthday today, it's not, but anything, um, people would say, oh, shame,
Yes.
shame.
Yes. Yeah, the Zulu and the Xhosa tribe, they often have that expression, which is, yeah, it's interesting. I wonder where that came from and
Yeah. I
how
feel like I heard a lot of white people say it too. Shame.
that's interesting. Well, I suppose that's very reflective.
Mm. So your spiritual journey, your discovering your magic, um, you're such a magical person. Do you think you must have some fairy blood in you or something? Like a past life you were a fairy or something?
Yeah, the past life work that I've done has been very eye-opening and confirming for me, which I'm not going to go into that now, but it's really explained a lot of what is going on in this life.
Mm.
So what I will say is there's been this thread through past lives of deep spiritual um, practicing
Mm. Do you,
and practice. making difference in different ways and having intense spiritual experiences,
Mm.
which explains, the one a healer that I worked with, he explained that when you've gone through so much in past lives, then you obviously you bring that information, and thus as a child, this is like, you use what is with you. And hence, we just touched on a few of the experiences, but that was very real for me. But it's interesting that, I chose to come into a situation or an environment where that was not understood.
Mm.
Mm.
Yeah. So how does your family feel about what you're doing now? Do they accept your gifts and things like that?
You know, they've come to, some of it has been a challenge, and some places we just don't go to, we don't talk about, because we are on very different pages. And that's okay.
Mm.
I'm comfortable with that. I don't ever feel uncomfortable. I do think sometimes that others do feel uncomfortable. Um, is it because somebody else is so spiritually comfortable that they feel uncomfortable? Who knows? I don't know. Um, but, I did spend a good portion of my, let's say, high school time and early adults definitely trying to change and be more normal and fit in, and tick the boxes for the family. And I couldn't do it, didn't happen. And eventually, you know what, this is me, so it's up to you. You got to accept it or not. That's also your choice. So yeah, I have um, been, as I mentioned earlier, teased in childhood, but I still get it to this day. I've not just from brothers and sisters, but it's like family at large,
Mm.
um, being seen in a certain light.
Mm. Takes a
And
thick skin, doesn't it?
yeah, I used to make me anxious, and I used to be reactive to it, and I would just withdraw and all sorts of things. And now, as time moves on, and I suppose it's maybe an age thing as well, you become comfortable with who you are,
Mm.
and that's okay.
Yeah, I that's a kind of a common theme. It's like as people are nearing that middle age change of the body,
Yeah,
going beyond that, it's like, huh, all those things that seemed so important before just really aren't.
exactly.
Yeah.
But
I have a question about so South Africa. There each country has their different like lore, in Sweden there's the Nisa. You're supposed to call out the window before you dumped out the hot water in the morning, so to warn them to move out of the way, and they would feed your cows or whatever. Like, um there's the stories fall out of fashion. They stop telling their kids. Did you were you told the stories of the lore of the country? Did that influence you at all?
so, no, I was growing up in the thick of apartheid time, but
Right, yeah.
no clue or whatsoever. All I do remember is becoming very friendly with the little African girl whose mom was the domestic for our home for some time. And then there came a time my mom spoke to me and said, "You can't play with her." And I was like, "But she's here in the day and I'm here and we're the same age." I would never just take things lying down, and I couldn't understand. And I remember standing at the top window, looking out the window and watching her play outside and me not allowed to go down, and I just couldn't understand. Didn't make sense. And it was only, of course, years later where started to get hints of this place that we live in that I had one view of. Not everybody's having the same experience. You don't think about certain things as a child, like when we go to the beach, why is there different changing rooms for different people? I didn't see that when I was really little, only like later, like very much later. And I was in my second last year of high school when the schools became integrated. And we had 5 students joining us of across different nationalities. So it was African and Indian and Malay and what have you. And I'll never forget our English teacher on the first day of school. He said, right, we're not going to have a normal day. This is not a normal day. This is like a huge day for South Africa. We are going to talk about this. And I remember us white students, we were just like mesmerized and gobsmacked. We hardly said a word. We were just listening to these teenagers talk to us about their life and what they've been going through. And we were like, did you know about this? Did you know all this stuff was going on? Did your parents tell you? You know, it was, the media was censored. Everything was censored. You didn't know. And it was a huge shock. So all I remember was just silence. And going home, and obviously all the parents now getting interrogated. Like, why didn't we know? And slowly over those 2 years, and I matriculated in 1992. And then, of course, we had the big election in 1994, the first fully open and integrated election. And it was, if I think about my world, 5 years prior to that, chalk and cheese. I just, can't even put words to describe. And I think a lot of it is to do with the shock. It was so unexpected. It's not like, oh, we kind of knew. Parents knew, the adults knew, but growing up in that, everybody tried to keep, especially from, being in the environment I was in. The children were very much, what's the word?
Protected in a bubble.
Yes, bubble wrapped, absolutely.
Wow. Oh my goodness. I feel like we could talk a whole episode just about that. Like the experience of being a white person in South Africa. I was shocked at how people would avoid eye contact with me and call me madam at the grocery store. I'm like, I'm not a madam. What are you talking about? Why don't you look me in the eye while you're mopping the floor? Like, I'm just working here and we're people. But yeah, what an experience. Is there anything that you would like to say to kind of close off this episode? Like any encouragement, anything that's on your heart to speak?
So the Taoist principle of Wu Wei is the path of effortless action. And I would like to end on that because that's really been like the center path for me through my journey through life, really. And what would the world be like if we were all just a little bit more relaxed? All just a little bit more in a motion of slowing down, not non-action, but, and I wouldn't even go and put there mindful action, but it's more of an awareness of less is more. And I think that can be applicable for all areas of life.
Mm.
We live with that principle. I often sit and ponder what the world would look like if suddenly that could be something that was understood and followed through by everybody.
Mm.
Way.
Mm. Well, thank you so much for such a wonderful time. I know that, like, yeah, we could keep going for another 6 hours, but thank you so much. The way that I end my conversations is I give hugs.
Oh,
Hugs.
thank you, Katie. I really
Thank
appreciate
you.
that
No.
time that you've taken to connect with me and the beautiful questions and the work that you're doing. It's really, really touching. So you are appreciated. Thank
No.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for being here. I would love to hear your thoughts about this. I would love to hear how it resonated with you, and if you have any awesome fairy supernatural stories, I would love to hear them. I would love to dive into them. So reach out to me if you'd like to be a guest. Be sure to check out all of her links if you resonate with her. You can find her on Insight Timer, and any other links that she has, I will be sure to include them down below in the description/show notes. It's so exciting to talk to people who've been in places that I've been. Sometimes it feels like it was a dream. Like, did I really spend years of my life there? Did that really happen? Because so much has happened in my life since then. I'm having another conversation with a South African woman, and I'm really excited to share that one too. So once that is up, you can search for that. To go back to the theater experience I had in South Africa, I was with an organization called Covenant Players. So I have some other episodes on this channel talking with people about their missionary experiences, good, the bad, and the ugly, all for the purpose of collective healing and speaking the truth that maybe didn't have a chance to get spoken before. But thanks so much for being here, for listening, for opening your heart. It really means a lot. Bye! Hugs! I'm so glad you're still here. Please like this video, share it with a friend, and be sure to subscribe. Bye!